print publishers today are sitting in a very different state, literally in a contradictory state. On one hand, they claim to reach out to the audiences that actually prefer and appreciate quality content, yet the ad budgets seem to be going elsewhere. We are going to understand why that is happening and how marketers can look at making sure that the monies that they're spending reach the right audience. And I have Jamie Jouning, who is going to tell us. He is the global head for ads at The Economist. Jamie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak
Pleasure.
to
Thank you
us.
for having me.
So I'm going to start with a very simple thing. And like I mentioned, the advertising investment in news. In 2016, it was 20% of the budgets. It's less than 4% today. So according to you and from where you are seated, what are the reasons for this? Do you think it is because brands are hesitant to spend in news, thinking that people are not reading it? Is it because of the fact that advertisers are steering away from certain topics like news, politics, conflict, or social issues?
I think there's definitely an element of that. Yeah, I mean, brand safety is increasingly important for most of our advertisers, and we obviously respect that. I do think, though, that most of our consumers, most of our readers, The Economist, can fairly easily tell the right sort of advertising in the right environment and quite comfortable and quite happy with that. So it's a bit of a frustration sometimes that we're still seeing so much, so many brands focusing purely on brand safety and not really about the quality of the content that we're creating. And I think that, to me, is the fundamentally important part of this. If you've got good content and good editorial and good journalism, it's authentic, it's full of integrity, then an advertising placed against it should work, whether that's war, whether it's geopolitics, whether it's the economy. I feel strongly that you can have both without detracting from the overarching experience.
But do you think that the new age creators of content, you call them influencers or content creators or KOLs, as they are called, they are now becoming someone who have an opinion, and though they might not be able to bring to the table the kind of depth that hardened or journalists who have been in the trenches bring, advertisers seem to feel an affinity towards them, feeling that they are able to resonate their brand messaging or much better to the audience. Do you think it's a very fickle state to be in?
I think there is a degree of fickleness, yeah, absolutely. And the influence play their part in the media landscape, undoubtedly. I think what brands like The Economist do is provide that depth, that level of understanding, which you cannot get simply from an influencer. The amount of work, the amount of legwork that goes into producing some of the articles that The Economist writes is second to none. And it means that you're guaranteed sort of clarity. And I think in this world, which is increasingly mad, chaotic, what stands out more than anything is clarity. And having a brand or having a publication or having journalists who can break that down and make sense of the world is incredibly important. And that sort of trust in an authentic brand, that is hard to replicate, and it's hard to replace. Even the best influencers can't replace that level of trust and that level of authenticity.
While we're talking about brand safety, till a few years ago, brand safety was something that was discussed in boardrooms about how your brand is going to be positioned in a certain place, especially in print publications. If it was a magazine, they would ensure that it was not placed alongside a certain article or context. But now, it seems that marketers are largely relying on keyword blocking tools, to define what is a kind of contextual placement. And often this also blocks out balanced journalism, like the kind that The Economist is known for. So do you think that advertisers are being overly cautious, about where their brand is appearing next to news content? And is this a slippery slope?
I think it is. I think it's a very slippery slope, and I would love to see it change and for advertisers to have a deeper look at how that is actually impacting on where their ad gets seen. To your point, it's the environment is the key. And I think consumers are perfectly used to reading news items. In this current world, there's so much going on. There's so much, difficult discussions, difficult topics. But that shouldn't stop an advertiser appearing against what is good, interesting, engaging content. And I think consumers understand that difference.
So you mentioned about the fact that in your session also you mentioned about how things are changing, everything is dynamic. We are seeing volatility across the board. But despite these headwinds, I believe that the Economist has managed to grow its subscriptions, right? And it's the most important thing. It's managed to increase its customer lifetime value, which is very critical. And a large part of it was by redesigning its paywalls. It was by express checkouts for people who want to make the payments and deeper reader relationships. So, for a premium publisher like The Economist, do you think this kind of resilience comes from dialing down to two structural advantages, which is its portfolio and its scale?
Say again?
Do you think that, being able to achieve this kind of growth is largely because of the fact it has the advantages of its portfolio, its legacy, and its scale?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, we have focused very hard and strongly on our subscriber. It's a subscriber-first business. We put the subscriber at the heart of everything that we do. Every piece of content that The Economist produces, you have to pay to access it. And I think that's a very, very strong position to be in. But you're only as good as the content you create. If the content isn't good enough, then you won't get people subscribing to you, and you won't sort of have the retention levels that we managed to have. The point of The Insider, which is a new video show that we've introduced back in October, is to encourage a new generation of Economist users. We recognize there's a need to serve content in a different way, and that content is video first, and The Insider is our video first news journalism, shown sort of allowing our subscriber into the newsroom. And that is a genuine effort to try and broaden out the reach of The Economist and ensure that we're serving our content in ways that our consumers want to consume it.
So you mentioned about the fact that the Insider was created in October 2025 to reach out to a larger audience, which is the Gen Z, who are the ones who have a very low retention
Short
attention
attention span.
Right?
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. I mean, some of these shows are 45 minutes long. In fact, most of them are 45 minutes long. They go into an extraordinary amount of depth and analysis. So, our aim is to ensure that people are seeing as much of that as possible. But then we put clips on social, cut downs across our social environment, our social ecosystem, which allows people to have a little bit of an insight into it. And then if they like what they see on social, they invariably then end up coming back onto the main core digital platform and consuming the 45-minute show. And I think the content, and I'm a huge fan, I'm biased, I know, but once you start one of these shows, it's very hard just to switch off because the content is so good.
So if I were to, ask you to largely dive, since you launched Insider in 2025 and to reach out to the younger cohort, what percentage of conversions have you actually seen from this audience? Or do you still find the more mature people who appreciate analytical, long-form, deep-diving content still continue?
I haven't got the figures off the top of my head. We're certainly seeing a younger audience come into the Economist ecosystem because of The Insider. But the older generation, who are also very important to us, they're enjoying it as well, and they're subscribing and they're retaining their subscription. So I think there's a mix, there's a balance. Of course, I wouldn't sit here and say that we've found a huge new cohort of youngsters coming into the business, but we are seeing an uptick in that demographic, definitely.
So, I was just looking at some of the numbers that you had mentioned. You have 1.2 million subscribers on The Economist, right? And since you released the Insider, you have got a significant percentage of people, 2 million who are coming from social media?
Episode views, I think it was 2 million episode views. So we've had 2 million episode views, so individual views of our shows since launch. So that's numbers, it's the actual number of views.
All right. And again, even in this episodic views, I think I might be getting my numbers mixed up, but approximately 50% of them are the ones who are coming from social media. Is that right?
No, 80% was the number of people who are consuming on our app. And we have 75 million views on social media. So the cut downs we talked about, there's 75 million of those across our social media ecosystem.
Okay, so what is the kind of strategy that you have employed, I mean, without revealing a lot of trade secrets, to ensure that, you have that content coming out without inundating the viewers? Because if you're going to keep coming out with so much content, though you have 4 different buckets, you have defense, tech, economics, and geopolitics, right? At the same time, the targeting of each of this audience will have to be clearly mapped. You also don't want to put out so much that, the feed, the TL gets...
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, I mean, this is our B2C team predominantly who look after this side of the business, but what we do is we utilize our existing subscriber base with communication via newsletters. They sound old school, but they aren't. They work very well in this instance. And we push out 2 newsletters a week announcing what content we've got coming. And that has proven very, very strong in terms of people understanding what the content is coming down the line and whether or not they want to watch it. So that's an important part. And then we just take the best clips. The editorial team have a real feel, the video team have a real feel for those clips which they know are going to make the headlines. And they will cut those down and put them into 5-minute snippets and put them across our ecosystem. And that's generating real excitement and real, exposure and scale that we would never have had before. So, utilizing social in the way that we do is proving, hugely beneficial.
So, I have grown up reading The Economist. I still read The Economist. Economist is actually my Sunday reading.
Good.
Because I devote that kind of time. But if you're talking to a younger audience who, like we mentioned, prefer snackable content, and if they're getting a lot of their information on social media team, is a print publication in the works, where you can probably put all of it together and ensure there is a print version also there, because that is where the advertisers who want to reach out to this cohort also get a bang on the buck?
So, I'm a huge believer in print. I've spent most of my career in print, and I still believe the print product is incredibly important. It's the pinnacle of our publishing ecosystem, I suppose. So I don't see it going anywhere soon. But yeah, it's hard to get young Gen Z, millennials, looking at print products. That's just the reality, which is why we have to expand our offering across our digital platforms and video. I don't think the likelihood is we'll create a specific print product for a younger generation. I think people will grow into print. I think people will, still want that lean back experience, and that won't go away. It just takes a while to get there. That's my sense. That's my gut.
I hope you're proven
I
right.
hope so I'm right as well.
Yeah, after spending so many years in this industry, I don't want print going anywhere. In your presentation, you mentioned a very interesting thing, which is that search is becoming AI mediated. That is as per the McKinsey report, and that 44% respondents said that search is now their primary and preferred way. AI-generated search is the primary and preferred way to access content. Now, as AI assistants become more and more the first stop of information, publishers, somewhere or the other, face the risk of becoming disintermediated, right, from the audiences. So how is The Economist preparing for a post-search environment, where readers, you still want readers to interact not just with the AI summary, but, come to your site and then become paid subscribers?
Well, it's an very interesting question. And the interesting thing about The Economist at the moment, our strategy is we don't allow LLMs to crawl the website. And that's a strategic decision we've made. Whether that's the decision which will hold true in 5-6 years' time, I don't know. But at the moment, we very much keep a walled garden because we have a very strong subscriber base, and we feel that we should not be allowing LLM agents to crawl our site and give the content away for free. So that is our current reaction to it. Clearly on the downside of that is that we are not appearing in search as much. So that means that new subscribers are harder to find because of it. But at the moment, the balance feels about right. We want to protect the integrity of the journalism. We want to protect people who pay good money to read that journalism. And we feel strongly that's the right approach.
Okay, fair enough. So, The Economist, publications like The Economist and Campaign also, they attract a very specific type of readers. These are the kind of people who are highly educated, who are decision-making audiences. These are not simply people who are scrolling and viewing it to forget it. And they are the ones who are actively also processing the information to make purchase decisions. Now, how exactly, according to you, should advertisers rethink their approach for this kind of an environment? Because they need to capture this attention value. And majority of them just feel that if they place a particular ad over there, it's good enough. But they don't think beyond it. So what is your advice to such companies?
I always think advertising, particularly in digital, is about relevance. And that remains as important now as ever has done. It remains important in print and it remains important in digital. Context and relevance is vital. And if you are reading something and you're served a message in the right way against content which feels right and relevant to you, then you are doing a good job. And I don't think that will change. I think certainly from an economist perspective, we have an incredibly bright, smart audience, and they're used to understanding when they're being marketed to. And as long as that marketing feels right and adds value to their reading experience, then I think it's a good thing. I think the problems arise when advertising is inserted in the wrong place, it's not done elegantly, it's done in a disruptive way, and it's not the right message to that audience. That's when I think problems start to arise. But I'd like to think with us, there's a real clear correlation between the sort of advertising our readers want to see and the advertising that we deliver.
But a lot of times, this kind of decisions is taken by the agencies, right, to make the entire decision about in lieu of their clients, and you're not. I mean, there is an intermediary over there. So how exactly do you communicate that to the advertiser?
It's a very good question, and we have to work with client and advertiser. At The Economist, we work very hand in glove with the advertiser themselves, directly with the client. But we know also that the agency plays an incredibly important part, and it's about awareness and making sure they understand the value of The Economist, the value of the Economist audience, which is incredibly powerful and influential. And that, to me, is key. Once the agency understands the influence of that audience, then advertising across our portfolio becomes more obvious.
Okay. So last question, Jamie. If you were to give one advice to the young people who are here in this particular exhibition, majority of them either in the early stages of their career in the marketing space, what would that advice be?
I think the advice would be just step back and listen, and just take time. Just look at everything and try to understand what's happening, but take a little bit more time than rushing from one bit to the next.
And hail print, right? Print is going to be
Print is going to be around for a while longer, absolutely. And, it will work alongside the rest of our ecosystem.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to
Pleasure.
Campaign.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.